So I'm about halfway through reading Lord of the Rings for the first time, and I just got to the point where we meet Faramir. And everything that Faramir says is incredible. And he seems like someone who is guided by divinity in some sense in this book. And as I've been thinking about Faramir, I cannot help but think about his relationship with Boromir and the comparison and contrast between these two characters. And so this essay is not really an essay, it's just more me speculating about things. Because I want to talk about right now, what would happen had Faramir gone to Rivendell to seek the answers for his dream and Boromir stayed behind? Now, this is going to essentially be broken into two different parts. There's going to be an initial part that I think is very, very good because Faramir joining the Fellowship would have been incredible initially for the Fellowship. But as the Fellowship goes on and they cross the Rhoros, I think everything from that point on in the breaking of the Fellowship would have been fractured and awful. And so I want to talk about this speculative essay, or this speculative just me rambling. I didn't even write anything down for this essay, but I want to talk about this speculation for why I think Faramir joining the Fellowship wouldn't have helped at all, even though he's a significantly better character in the book than the movie. Because I'm sure there are some people here who have only seen the movie who are watching this and they're going, why would Faramir joining the Fellowship do anything to help the Fellowship at all? Faramir is like this weak, insecure character in the movie. That's true in the movie. In the book, he is anything but that. In the book, he's actually seen as one of the wisest characters in the entire series, in the entire book, just the entire book. And Sam even says that. Sam would agree with me because he thinks that Faramir is made up of like wizard stuff. He calls him a wizard later on in this chapter, because everything that Faramir says comes from deep, deep wisdom, and even more than that, it seems like he has the touch of divinity on him. And so let's say, completely take this away. This is what happens initially. Faramir has these dreams, and in these dreams, he has this idea of this ring. The entire incantation is, seek for the sword that was broken. In Imladris it dwells. There shall be counsels taken stronger than Morgul spells. There shall be shown a token that doom is near at hand. For Isildur's bane shall waken, and the half-length forth shall stand. So this is essentially what Faramir is having a dream of. And he has this multiple times. And then all of a sudden, his brother has this dream once. He shares this dream that Faramir has. And so both of them go before the elders and his father Denethor, who was steward of Gondor. And Boromir is chosen. Essentially, Faramir says, I wish I was chosen so all these things didn't happen to Boromir. But he thinks he should be chosen essentially because maybe he's a wiser person who knew the outcome of what was going to happen here. And unfortunately, Boromir is chosen because he's hardier and sturdier and older than Faramir. And so let's reverse this role. Let's say that Faramir goes to Rivendell and he starts this journey with the Fellowship of the Ring. Now, initially, things would have been very, very different because in the books, Aragorn and Boromir have this kind of sword measuring contest because Boromir goes to the Council of Elrond and he essentially is saying, none of you understand what I have gone through and none of you understand where I'm coming from. We are on the front lines against Mordor. And when I was there in the book, and I still think this to some extent, he's very right. None of these other characters really know what Boromir is going through, but Boromir has a big ego. He thinks he is the only person in Middle-earth who is fighting up against evil. He doesn't know what Aragorn has been doing up north. I mean, I haven't read the appendices, so I don't even know what Aragorn is doing up north, but everyone tells me that Aragorn is doing a lot of stuff up north. The same thing, Gandalf on this whole journey, his journey was nuts for how far he traveled in Middle-earth to figure out about the ring and to get to Rivendell with Frodo. Now, Boromir seems isolated. He seems like he's an individual here, and he's going up against Aragorn, and he's fighting up against him in this moment in the Council of Elrond. Faramir wouldn't have done that. Faramir is a much humbler person, and he's a lot more ego-centered. And so Faramir in the Council of Elrond would have just acquiesced and believed everything that was happening, and he would have given an account of Gondor, but he wouldn't really have gone on to say the things that Boromir was saying. He would have likely welcomed Aragorn back as the rightful king of Gondor. And so let's take things as they go from here. I don't think there would be many significant changes to the plot in the first section where they essentially go from Rivendell to Lothlorien, but I think there would have been one thing that the Fellowship didn't lack but needed more of, which was wisdom. Now, Gandalf is a very, very wise person, but it would have been interesting to see how this played off with two people who were wise. Because yes, Aragorn is wise, yes, Gimli is wise, and Legolas is wise, but Faramir seems like he's painted as a character who is as wise as Gandalf, which is wild because Faramir is simply just a man, and he's young at this point too. I think he's something like 39 years old or something. I might be totally wrong on that, but I feel like I heard that. So he's young and he's a man and he's still incredibly wise, has this great amount of wisdom to him. And so the entire first part of this journey would have been encapsulated by a lot of wise decisions that they made. Even some of the terrible things that they had to do, I think would have been encapsulated by a lot of wisdom. And I think Faramir would have been able to talk to Aragorn and convince him of things better than Boromir was actually able to do. Now, Boromir was probably a better warrior, so when this whole thing goes off with the Balrog and Boromir jumps in blowing his horn, I don't know if Faramir would have done that. I'd like to think that he would have done that because he's a very brave person. And he has that same kind of moxie as Boromir, because when Frodo and Sam are captured by these men and Faramir goes off charging against the Haradrim and the Oliphants, Faramir is the first one to lead his men into battle. But I think he has a bit more wisdom than Boromir, as I keep saying. Now, after that, after they get out of Moria, after Gandalf falls, one thing that I think is different in this story from this point is that they have, again, Faramir who's helping Aragorn make these decisions. After this fall of Gandalf, it seems like Aragorn is alone the leader. If Faramir was in this group, Faramir would also be a leader. And when they get to Lothlorien, a decision that would probably be a lot easier because Faramir does respect and like the realm of the elves, especially Lothlorien. He would love to go there. He actually talks about that a little bit this chapter. He's a bit afraid of it, but he would still love to go there. He goes there, and in this moment, Boromir is tempted with the ring. In this little section in the film, it happens as well, where they all meet Galadriel, and Galadriel essentially gets inside their mind and tempts them with something. For Boromir, I think it's pretty much consensus that she offered Boromir the ring and the ability to save Minas Tirith. And Boromir, because that was ingrained in his head, then sought to take the ring from Frodo. And he sought to do that at Amon Hen by the Rhoros, where that big waterfall is. Now, let's say this happens with Faramir. Faramir goes to Lothlorien. His temptation would probably have been resisted, and he would not have gone quite as crazy as Boromir did in this entire moment. Because as soon as they're let off in these boats down the Anduin, Boromir is going crazy. He's muttering to himself. Sam is actually a little afraid of him, but Sam is protective of Frodo. Faramir likely would have resisted temptation. Now, he wouldn't have resisted temptation ultimately, I think, because everyone probably would succumb to the temptation of the ring, but he would have resisted a lot better than Boromir had. And I think in this moment, it's interesting because the temptation and the real reason that Frodo leaves the Fellowship is because of this kicking out of the nest that Boromir does with the temptation of Boromir. Because Boromir seeks to take the ring from Frodo. And so Frodo puts it on and hides, and he runs away. And all the rest of the Fellowship scatter to go look for him, and then Frodo takes the opportunity to get the boat, and then he rows across the Rhoros with Sam. Now, that's how this story ends in book 1, which is really book 2. But let's say Faramir was there. Faramir would not have tried to take the ring from Frodo. In this meeting that they're having in the Breaking of the Fellowship chapter, there's all this tension that's happening in the actual book. But if Faramir was there, I think there would be less tension. I think Frodo would have gone off to think by himself for what he needed to do. He would have gotten back and reconvened and talked to the Fellowship, and Faramir would have not necessarily gone along with him, but there would not have been any enmity or discord or like breaking of the Fellowship at this distinct moment. And this is where I think everything would go to crap right after this. Because everything that happened in the book seems like it was divinely there because the God of Middle-earth wants it to be there. And as terrible as that sounds, because this is like everything happens for a reason kind of thing. And sometimes there are terrible things that happen in people's lives and it seems like God is making that happen for whatever reason that God wants to make it happen. I think that's true in this case in Lord of the Rings, that there are terrible things that happen, but there is almost a greater goal at mind. Now, let's look at this. If All of them were in harmony together in the breaking of the fellowship. They all row across the Rhoros together, and perhaps they cordially break up there. Perhaps Frodo and Sam are sent off. They maybe get past Emmanuel, and then they break off right after that. Now, Gollum might not have been in the picture at this point, but there would have at the very least been a clean break off of the fellowship. Maybe Frodo and Sam go through the marshes or something like that, and the rest of the fellowship goes to Minas Tirith. If that happens with Faramir, then Merry and Pippin don't get captured by the orcs because they run off. And this is what is really important, because Gandalf says that these two are like stones, small stones that start an avalanche. If they don't get captured, then the three hunters in Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas don't go after them. If they don't go after them, they don't meet Gandalf and Fangorn, and they don't actually go set Theoden free. And now there's a big battle that happens with Saruman and the forces that he's making with Theoden and the men of Rohan. And so let's say they all meet at Helm's Deep right here. They don't have this help of Aragorn. They don't have this help of Gandalf going to get other men. They don't have this help of Legolas and Gimli too, which are huge in this battle. It's just the kingdom of Rohan up against the kingdom of Saruman. And I have to be honest, I love Rohan with everything in me, but I do not think they would have lasted long in this fight. Or they would have lasted long because they're valiant warriors, but I think they would have lost. And so Saruman would have gained power here. And Saruman is a competing force against Sauron. He's not an ally against Sauron. So now you have not only Sauron looking for the ring, you have Saruman, who has just beaten and taken over the entire kingdom of Rohan. Now he is out looking for the ring. And he sends his forces, perhaps he sends his forces out east in order to go look for Frodo and to go look for the Fellowship. So now there is a gap narrowing. There are the forces of Sauron to the east, and there are the forces of Saruman to the west, who are closing in on Frodo and Sam and the Fellowship and the ring. It is a battle here for who's going to get the ring first. And all this happens wildly. I truly believe this because Boromir goes rather than Faramir. And Boromir is overcome with temptation and tries to take the ring from Frodo, and the Fellowship breaks. And all of this happens in this moment. I think this is all divinely guided in this chapter, in the breaking of the Fellowship chapter. And if Faramir was there, I think things would have radically been different, and things would have gone a totally different way, which would have been maybe healthier. It's great for Merry and Pippin that they weren't captured by these prisoners, or captured and taken prisoner by these orcs, and these orcs from all over, which is another crazy chapter. And they wouldn't have gone through all sorts of problems. But then you also have the moment for Merry and Pippin where they help propel the Ents to go fight. So because they're not there, perhaps the Ents just sit on their roots and they don't really do anything. And so this battle that happens is really the last battle of the kingdom of Rohan, and Saruman takes over Rohan, and then he starts pressing his forces east to go look for the ring. Now, not only that, let's say that Sam and Frodo then break off from the Fellowship and they're passing through Ithilien. And let's say Aragorn and his whole company is marching toward Minas Tirith. Who is there to meet them? Boromir. Boromir has been sitting on this throne, and perhaps he's been sitting there for maybe like a year or so since his brother left, and he's been wanting this throne more and more. I think in this moment, when Aragorn comes with the sword, he would have put up more of a fight against this. Now, the people of Gondor know that Aragorn is probably the rightful king, so when he comes back with a sword that's reforged, they would have put him on the throne. But I think that also Boromir would have resisted this a little bit more because he himself wants the throne. He himself wants the glory. And so I think there would have been a little bit more difficulty here. And then all of a sudden, Frodo is going through Ithilien. And let's say, by some chance as well, that Boromir is sent off to go and take a company of about 100 to 200 men and go stop the Haradrim from coming in through Ithilien. And so rather than meet up with Frodo and Sam, where Faramir is meeting up with Frodo and Sam, all of a sudden Boromir meets up with Frodo and Sam. And I can see in that moment, Boromir seeing the ring, seeing the weapon of the enemy with two halflings, and not doing the same thing that Faramir does. Weirdly, and this is going to sound bizarre, but I think the way that Faramir acts in the movies is exactly how Boromir would act in the book had Boromir been replaced with Faramir in this moment. So Boromir would have gone on to Ithilien. he would have seen Frodo and Sam, taken them captive, gone to Osgiliath with them, and potentially even taken the ring all the way to Minas Tirith, because Boromir wants his own glory a lot more than Faramir does. And he's a lot more insecure of a character. And I don't know if Boromir really would have had this moment where he says, I count my life as forfeit now, and he would have sent Frodo and Sam off to go destroy this ring. I really, truly, honestly, I love Boromir with everything in me. He's one of my favorite characters in the entire series, but I don't know if he would have had it in him to do that. And so I think it's a weird exercise to do, and this is all speculation, but I think if you change Boromir and Faramir's roles, and Faramir was the one that joined the Fellowship and Boromir was the one that stayed behind and cleared out Ithilien, I think everything would have gone to crap. And so it really is a testament in this book to how much divine providence is guiding everyone in this book to do exactly what they need to do. Because with this vision, it seems like Faramir has this vision and he sees this and he knows what he needs to do, but Boromir has this once, and all of a sudden Boromir supplants this whole entire idea that Faramir should go, and it seems like that's divinely guided. And even Boromir's temptation by Galadriel, and then the breaking of the Fellowship where he's tempted and he tries to take the ring from Frodo, I think everything in that instance, if Faramir was in that role, would have radically changed the story. And so I think Boromir was divinely guided to go to Rivendell, and unfortunately divinely guided that he was going to be tempted by the ring and fall, because his fall leads to everything else that happens after this. And everything in this story seems like it is divinely guided. Now, these characters who are in this story have a hard time really seeing that, I think, but Faramir is someone who can see right through that. And so all these characters, you don't want to tell all these characters, everything is happening for a reason, because all these terrible things are happening. But in some sense, because we are the readers and we have a larger view on the story, I think we see the hands of divinity and the hands of the God of Middle-earth all throughout this story much clearer than the people in the Fellowship could. And so I think it's just a fun little exercise to actually walk through this and to see what would have really happened had Boromir been replaced with Faramir. But let me know your thoughts. I would love to hear what you have to say about this. I think my camera died, so that's why this whole screen just went to me sharing pictures rather than just my face. But let me know what you think. I will see you guys in the next one. And as always, remember, we look toward Numenor that was, and beyond to Elvenhome that is, and to that which is beyond Elvenhome and will ever be. I'll see you in the next one.